Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to participate for this meeting on Thursday, and I was called for this Thursday meeting of ESLSCA. As you can see in my presentation, I set below the date of today 43rd day of confinement, because in Italy, basically right now the calendar is shifted between the real date of the year and the confinement day. So actually we are like, I would say at the 43rd day of confinement. The title of this, of my meeting is Ars Thanatos. So is, I would say, this relationship between the art and death. So art in the time of COVID-19. As you have seen, or as I think you read from the email that Melanie sent to you, it's, I would say, what is a meeting, is a conference about the role of the art nowadays. And nowadays, into, I would say, this terrible time of the COVID. So this is the, I would say, this is the reason why I decided, so as you can see from the cover, to choose this image that, in my opinion, it's quite, I would say, relevant. So let's start to have a look to my agenda. And so what we are going to see this evening. One thing that I want to say is that, as in general I used to do with my students in class, and as we are all bored, all fine, at home, I would say it's a sunny day. I don't want to bore you so much, and I don't want to do a classic lecture about art, so artist, movement, here, and so on. I would like to give you, I would say, an unconventional discussion with videos on multimedia contents and so on. So anyway, my agenda will be my very fast self-introduction. Then after that, of course, we are going to see what is art, and so a definition of art. What is beauty and the importance of beauty and aesthetics for art. Then a definition of artwork, because nowadays I would say we are used to say that everything is art. In effect, not everything is an artwork. Something is an artwork, something not. So I'm going to give you the parameter to define if something is an artwork or not at all. Then we are going to see which are the connections between art, design, and luxury. Very important. Why? Because as you know, I'm doing seminars in the university about design, about luxury. I'm a designer, but I work for luxury group since 12 years. So, of course, I understood that there is, of course, a relationship between art, design, and luxury. And I'm going to explain to you which is this kind of relation. Then we are going to see the relation between art and society. And so we are going to see which is this one. And then at the end, of course, we are going to see as last point, Art and Thanatos. That is the title of this presentation. So the relationship between death and very, I would say, critical, dramatic moment in history with art. We will see that the moment in history characterized by plague, by death, by famine, by wars, has been instead moment where the artistic movement has flourished really, really, really a lot. So let's go to have a look to the presentation. So very fast introduction, because I see that a lot of I would say the public this evening knows me quite well. So I'm Angelo Barducci, 35 years old, from Florence. So as you can see in this slide, for me, Florence and Italy, of course, is my DNA, is my heritage, is my city. I'm an architect in terms of course, of curricula, but then I specialize myself in interior designer and luxury as luxury designer. I work for jewelry, watch, and fashion accessories design, as well as I told you, I worked for this reason for many years for Richemont Group, the luxury holding group. And I was a tutor of the corporate design school in Milan of the group. The name was Creative Academy. And thanks to, I would say, Françoise and other persons that trusted in me, nowadays I'm, of course, I'm collaborating with your university as teacher for, I would say, seminars about luxury design, history of art, history of fashion, and as well as, of course, for brand identity and brand DNA. Just to understand a little bit me, and I would say, so also you will understand the language of this presentation, this is the portfolio of my interests. So this is, for example, projects about interior design that I realized in Milan. My project, for example, in jewelry, this is project for contemporary jewelry for I would say, a contemporary brand of jewelry design, as well as this is a project that I designed and has been realized for the Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. It's a jewelry watch. This is my project for fashion. So I would say this is my universe. And as you can see, is a universe where design, the hand drawing, and so art and luxury are really, really entertaining. So let's start into the specific to, I would say, the core of our presentation. So art, and first of all, so what is art? Okay, the terms art derive from the Latin ars. That means art, skill, craft. This word, of course, has been, of course, then used and comes from the 13th century manuscript. Of course, it's an artwork and a theme that is very, very then developed by all the artists. This is a drawing, you may know, of Michelangelo Buonarroti. So art, I would say, interests a different range of human activities, because nowadays, if we speak about art, we speak about visual, we speak about audio, we speak about performance, and so performing art. We speak about conceptual art, and so conceptual ideas. So I would say art is a little bit, a lot of media, involved a lot of media. But anyway, art, the aim of art is to be appreciated for the beauty and emotional power. These are two concepts that are fundamental, beauty and emotion. Of course, the classical branches of art, so what art and how art has been considered into the centuries, have been in general painting and sculptures. Then, of course, as I was saying to you, music, theater, film, dance, performing arts, interactive arts are, of course, all branches of art that have been developed starting from the 17th century and then going forward. For example, in the classic definition of art, as you may know, fine arts, and so the so-called Academy of Fine Arts, were divided and distinguished from the decorative or applied arts that were something else, and considered the applied arts something less important than the academic art. Of course, this one is completely wrong, and we know that today, nowadays, there is no more this differentiation between art and, of course, a prior or most important art and a less important art. As you can see in the slide, for example, I decided to set these two images. One I think you may know is the Venus of Botticelli, that represent, of course, concept of aesthetics and beauty worldwide recognized. On the right side, you can see instead an African mask. This mask, why I decided to put it? Because to make you reflect and understand that they are both both work of art, artworks. One is, of course, an artwork with the aesthetics and the parameters of the Western culture. The other art, the mask, the African mask, is, of course, a work of art that is into the parameters and into the aesthetic and into the culture of another continent. Anyway, they have, of course, so both of these work of art as specific characteristic and specific, I would say, topics, settings that has to be considered. So, art. What is it, art? This is the first of the multimedia contents that I decided to set into my presentation. It's quite funny. It explains to you a little bit so why art is so important for us.
You might think there was a simple answer to this. After all, we know how to say what most things...
Sorry, I just checked the sound.
You might think there was a simple answer to this. After all, we know how to say what most things are for, like this or that. And people flock to museums like never before, so they must have their motives. But when it comes to art, people get strangely afraid to ask too directly what it might all be for. Because, well, everyone except you might know the answer already. It's perhaps too obvious, it's perhaps too complicated. The result is an awkward silence and a lot of confusion. Maybe it shouldn't be that hard to say what art is for. Maybe we can have a go at describing certain rather clear purposes to art. Here's 5 things that art might be able to do for us. It's an obvious but striking fact that the most popular works of art in the world show pretty things, happy people, flowers in spring, blue skies. This is the top-selling postcard in the world from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This enthusiasm for prettiness worries serious types a lot. They wonder, have people forgotten what life really like? But that seems a misplaced worry. We need pretty things close to us, not because we're in danger of forgetting the bad stuff, but because terrible problems weigh so heavily on us that we're in danger of slipping into despair and depression. That's why prettiness matters. It's an emblem of hope, which is an achievement. Prettiness, those flowers and blue skies and kids in meadows, is hope bottled and preserved, waiting for us when we need it. The world often requires us to put on a cheerful facade, but beneath the surface there's a lot of sadness and regret that we can't express from fear of seeming weird or a loser. One thing art can do is reassure us of the normality of pain. It can be sad with and for us. Some of the world's greatest works of art have been loved for their capacity to make the pain that's inside all of us more publicly visible and available. Like putting on a sad piece of music, somber works of art don't have to depress us. Rather, they give us the welcome feeling that pain is part of the human condition.
So, as you can see in this video, art. So, what the video was saying now to us is that, of course, I mean, there is not a reason why is important art, what art is for. But one thing that is, of course, comes out from the video is that, of course, art, we need of art. Why? Because art, of course, brings hope, brings, of course, joy once you see the work of art, brings emotion. Also, art is, of course, a way for people with a certain sensibility, like artists, to describe with their work of art a certain, I would say, timing or a certain situation. As you can see here, for example, the so I mean, we should start to understand this, and I mean, I decided to give you, so to have a look to who is an artist and how can be considered like an artist. So first of all, who is an artist? Of course, an artist is someone that creates something, an artwork with skill and imagination, a person that, of course, is learned of Master of Arts, of course, that has a certain skin and follower about manual art, craft and fine art, that, of course, is a practitioner about visual arts. But please, the most important thing that you have to take into consideration, and you have always to have in your mind, is that an artist is a person who produces artworks that are subject only to aesthetic criteria, not to functionality, neither to budget constraints. This is very important, and this is the main difference between an artist such Pablo Picasso. As you can see, he said every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up, and a designer as, for example, Le Corbusier, or better known as Charles-Édouard Jamet. I think that now it's quite well known, Le Corbusier, thanks to the amazing exhibition that nowadays I had the honor to see it in the Fondation Louis Vuitton about her great collaborator, Charlotte Perriand, and of course in this exhibition it comes out very well the importance of designer Le Corbusier into the creation of the most important projects of Charlotte Perriand, for example, the LC4, LC2, and so on. But, of course, as you can see here, a designer, we cannot say that a designer is an artist. So this is something that is very important, that another point that I want to focus my presentation. This presentation is about art, and we cannot speak about artist and designer. A designer, which is the different respect to an artist, is a person that has to answer to a specific request, brief, given from a client, commissioner, respecting budget and material constraints, and realizing something that is aesthetic and functional. So, a work of art stands for itself. A design object or a design product, as you know, is something that has to, of course, have a specific function and has a specific utility, as well as to be aesthetic, because no one of us is going to buy stuff for our houses that are horrible or that are, of course, ugly. For me, a designer is everyone, so every one of us that looks at ordinary things with extraordinary eyes. This is, in my opinion, the best definition of a designer. So everybody that can have a look to something that is very common, it is very normal, and with his, her eyes, can transform in something extraordinary. So, as we have seen right now, the main difference between an artist and a designer is that an artist is completely free. A designer is not at all free. A designer has to respect a specific project and a specific brief. Now, let's go to have a look to the other definition of art that comes from our culture. With our culture, I'm saying the Latin and Western culture. For example, Lucius Annaeus Seneca, one of the most important writers in Rome, in the 50s after Christ, he said what? That all art is but imitation of, I would say, the beauty of nature. So for Seneca, of course, art is the imitation of beauty. If we go forward with a definition, for example, for Pablo Picasso, art, what is it? Is not just an imitation, is not a replication of something, but as you see, Pablo Picasso goes more into the emotional side of art. And he says the purpose of art is washing the dust of daily life off our souls. This, in my opinion, is a very beautiful sentence. So art is something that can, of course, wash out the dust from our souls, from our, I would say, everyday normal life, and giving us a, I would say, a different perspective, a perspective that is extraordinary, that is special, that is not common. So these are the first, I would say, big topic of our presentation. So the concept of art. And I hope that until this moment, everything is clear. If you have any question, please stop me, interrupt me, make question. I mean, if you haven't understood something, no problem, it's Thursday, we are all confined. We are speaking about art, we are not speaking about management or economic or mathematics data, so every question is good, every question is right. And of course, curiosity is also very important for me, that I'm speaking in front of a computer. So as I would say, as we have seen until this moment, we have given the concept and the definition of art. But art, as we said, it's, I mean, as Seneca also said, is the imitation or representation in general of something that is beautiful. So we cannot separate the concept of art from the concept of beauty. So if we think about beauty, as we said, in art, as well as in beauty, there are two, I would say, some keywords that are fundamental. The first one is the mimesis, and as we said, is the concept of art as representation and emotion. But in the second step, we have the concept of the aesthetics, so how the artwork looks like, the form, the shape, and of course, the meaning of art. So the cultural meaning of the artwork. These are four fundamental keywords about art. And as you can see in these keywords, there is the concept of aesthetics. And of course, of mimesis. So, mimesis. To speak about this concept, I decided to insert in my slide a very beautiful picture, as you can see. It's, I hope everybody of you knows these paintings. Anyway, is a painting from Caravaggio, one of my favorite, I would say. And it's, we are in the full Mannerist era. Caravaggio painted these paintings in 1594, between 1594 1598, and this painting is located into the Pinacoteca Ambrosiana in Milan. This painting is one of the most important still life, or in Italian we used to say natura morta, of all the history of art. And why this painting was such innovative and such extraordinary at the time when Caravaggio painted it? Because Caravaggio, in this painting, respect to the other painters before him, he decided to represent something that I would say was not perfect. As you can see, the fruit or the leaves in these paintings are not perfect, are not perfectly green, vivid green, I would say, but they have all the signs of the passing of the time. You can see it on the grapes, you can see it on the apples, you can see it, I would say, on the pears and so on. So Caravaggio, in this, of course, painting, he decided what? To really represent the reality as it is. So not the perfection or a vision of perfection of the reality. He decided to represent the reality as it is. So with all its imperfection. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most important and meaningful work of art to express to you the concept of mimesis. So art as copying and as imitation. This is a very important concept because based on this concept, in the history of art, a lot of painters were not considered from the critics, I would say, good or important because they refused to be literal and, I would say, copying as or imitating reality as, for example, Michelangelo, Rubens, or Velázquez that were considered the classic painters, the classic artists. And so this is why the Cubism of Picasso or the Surrealism of Miro or the abstractism of Kandinsky or the action paintings of Jackson Pollock were considered for a certain time from the critics of art as, I would say, movement and artists minor respect to Michelangelo, Rubens, and the academic painters. But of course, this one, it doesn't exist and it's not valuable and right anymore. As you can see here, this is, for example, the another, I would say, is always concerning mimesis, another sample, in my opinion, quite interesting of mimesis. Here there are two works of art. One work of art on the left side is René Magritte, is a very artwork of him, Cécile Pampi. And of course, this work of art was very controversial and very discussed at the time when Magritte, we are in 1929, so we are still in a moment where the art was still a bit academic. René Magritte made, I would say, we can say here, a conceptual work of art that basically changed completely the idea of mimesis. Here he says, what you are looking is not a real pipe. What he wants to say is that he represents a pipe, but is not a concrete pipe, a pipe that you can use to smoke. Differently from him, for example, this is a specchio, a mirror, from Michelangelo Pistoletto. Michelangelo Pistoletto is an artist of the pop art in Italy, and he became very famous for the use, as you can see here, of big mirror with printing on top of this, I would say, mirror, in general steel mirror or I would say glass mirror, and basically the users, the visitors of the exhibition or of the gallery, basically communicate with the work of art directly because they mirror themselves inside the work of art. So here, as you can see, is another concept of mimesis. Is the concept really of the replication or imitation of reality and of the interaction of the observers with the work of art. So, if we speak about mimesis, which are the, I would say, between the most important artists for the mimesis, if we speak about the academic art, we have, of course, to mention Antonio Canova. Antonio Canova is, of course, the artist that has created the best, I would say, mimesis of ever. If we speak about, if we can think about his famous marble, his famous sculptures, everybody knows the Three Graces, everybody knows, I would say, for example, the portrait of Napoleon. He became the most important artist for the kings, or for, anyway, the royal courts at the time. And he became famous for his sculptures that were perfect and that imitate the body, the nature, of course, with an idealistic way that refers to the Greek and to the classical sculpture. On the other side, so on the opposite, we have what we can say the equivalence of Antonio Canova nowadays in terms of mimesis, but of course with different interpretation and different language. Fabrizio Plessi. Fabrizio Plessi is an Italian artist, and he became very famous because he decided to represent, thanks to video art, so with video, with television, screens, LED technology, and so on, the elements of the nature, the fires, the water, but of course putting these elements in contexts that were absolutely unusual and that creates work of art. To understand better this, let's see two videos, one about Canova and one about Plessi, that I'm sure will clarify to you the this connection between these two great artists. Concerning instead Fabrizio Plessi, this one is the installation that you realized in La Felice Pizza. As you can see here, he decided like the fire, he used like fire, water, to realize something that it's really, really, say, unusual for a theater like La Felice. So the, of course, the aesthetics in art is, these are, I would say, as we can see, so the concept of mimesis and the two concepts of that. But about aesthetic and about aesthetic in art, a lot of philosophers talk about that. Immanuel Kant, for example, he believed that art should not have a concept, but should be judged only on its formal qualities. Formal qualities that became not such important, as we said, in the 20th century, with other principle that was cubism, that was, of course, many other of this rhythm, harmony, unity that was used for defining it. So, from the philosopher of the past, so Plato, Aristotle, to the Renaissance, for example, Leonardo da Vinci, as well as Raffaello. As you know, this year is the 500th century from the anniversary from the death of Raffaello Sanzio. And there will be, of course, like great exhibition all over the world about that. But, of course, the romantic also concept of the art, where the artist is seen as a genius. Genius by, for example, Schlegel, Schopenhauer, Baudelaire, and so on. So this concept of the artist that is completely free and is a genius, so someone that, of course, is free to create and is, I would say, really different from the other person. Of course, if we still continue to see the evolution of aesthetics, in the 20th century, Croce, Cassirer, these are all other important philosophers and critics of art, they stress very much on the language and the symbolic expression. This is, for example, one of the iconic work of art of Michelangelo Pistoletto, and as you can see here, I mean, it's a work of art for the concept and for the symbol that is expressed in this work of art. Now that is the contraposition between the perfection of Venus, and of course the fast, I would say, the fast consumism of our society, of the fragmentation of our society, as you can see in this image. So the psychological trends and the symbolic value is coming in art more and more and more important with respect to just the qualitative and aesthetic value. Anyway, aesthetic movement and this aesthetism is a movement that in art flourished and boomed really in the 19th century. In the 19th century, there is a movement named aesthetic, because what was the aim was that art for art's sake. And it's a movement where great cultural men, as well as Oscar Wilde, so Walter Peters, so basically in UK, in London especially, Harold Bloom, they founded this group, this society for the aestheticism. And in 19th century, from the aesthetic movements, it will come out movements as the symbolism or the decadentism. This is a work of art of the most important painter of the aesthetic movement, that is Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Dante Gabriel Rossetti is also the masters of the so-called pre-Raphaelite painters. And also him, for example, as well as the pre-Raphaelite world, has been really celebrated in these last years, because in the past was an art movement not so considered and celebrated from the critics. So from the, I would say, mimesis plus, so the pragmatic features plus the cognitive features, that is aesthetic and the meaning, it comes the beauty. So the beauty of the work of art comes from these two magic words. From one that is the pragmatic world, so the, I would say, replication of reality, and from another world that is the aesthetic, so the meaning, so the symbolical one. Beauty is something that, of course, will always exist. Where there is truth, there is love, and reality, there is beauty. So it will always exist, and an inner beauty as well as an outward beauty are the two faces of the same coin. Of course, the beauty in nature as God's creation shows God's style, but human creativity is, of course, the tool of the human to create something that is beautiful, but that is different from the nature or from something that has been already created by God. And of course, this is in the image that everybody knows, this fountain in Versailles, is of course something that can really express the concept of beauty and the relation of creativity and art craft made by the man with the beauty of the nature. The beauty, we used to say, is always in the eye of the beholder. Also Shakespeare said in his plays Love, Lovers Lost. And here, for example, this work of art is another work of art of Caravaggio, and is the Narcissus of Caravaggio. As you know, the story of Narcissus, and also of this beautiful guy that is always with himself. So this is the representation also of the external beauty, but that has no beauty inside. So the story of Narcissus is a sad story, because it's the story, as I'm saying to you, of the beauty that doesn't have something the same beautiful as the outside, also inside the protagonist. So the beauty of the heart, the beauty of the soul, the beauty of the mind, also in a work of art must be represented. And for example, in this work of art of Caravaggio, you can see how the guy is really beautiful dressed with these brocade fabrics and tissues, but at the same time, the expression of him is a little bit like lost in looking himself into the world. So, going towards the conclusion of beauty, the beauty in art for Joachim Winckelmann, that is one of the most important historians of art, and for Victor Cheroulier, that is another important theory of art. Anyway, the beauty lies in three levels of beauty. There is the beauty of a form, there is the beauty of an idea, and there is the beauty of an expression. These are the three expressions of beauty. So, beauty of the form. In my opinion, this is an image that can really explain to you what is the beauty of the form and what is the beauty of the form in the past and nowadays. Because on your right side, you have the Venus of Milo, in the Museum du Louvre in Paris, that I think everybody has seen. And on the right side, you have instead an Asclepios sculpture of the 2015 of Igor Mitorai, one of the most talented and unfortunately died artists of our contemporaneity. As you can see, the reference to the classic idea of beauty is present in both. There are basically 2,000 years of 2,100 years of distance between these two works of art. But here, in both the work of art, when we see it, it's impossible to not see and to not appreciate the beauty of the shape, of the form, the sculptures that the artist decided to set, as well as the beauty of an idea. Also here, two, I would say, work of art that can express very well this concept. One old, of ancient art, and one of the more, we would say, more modern in a way art. One is on the left side, you have Giotto and the frescoes of Giotto in San Francesco d'Assisi Church. Here is the moment when St. Francis renounces to his father richness. And the beauty of idea here, what is it? Is, first of all, for example, the idea of Giotto to represent God how has the hand, so as you can see on the top of the fresco, is like a hand that is, I would say, going down from the sky and is indicating St. Francis, and I would say is guiding St. Francis in what he's doing. So I would say to take off his clothes and remain completely naked into the square of the city. And also the other impressive idea of Giotto is that Giotto has been the first one to introduce the concept of perspective. So the scene, as you can see here, is not represented in 2D dimension, but the position of the figure as well as the buildings are in 3D view. So two brilliant ideas. On the right side, you have René Magritte, The Empire of Light. Here, what's the beauty? The beauty, the idea is very strong. He wants to represent a metaphysic reality where the sky, a very beautiful sky, cloudy sky in daylight, is on, I would say, a scene that is instead a dark or a night scene. So I would say here the beauty of this of both this work of art stands both into the idea and not only into the aesthetic of the work of art. Then the beauty of an expression. Expression means how you express the work of art. And the work of art can be expressed like in total, or can be a total work of art, for example, if it's a music, or if it's a, for example, theater work of art. For example, the Eurydice of 16th century, of the 17th century, is the first, I would say, theatrical opera that has been represented in Florence for the wedding between the Dukes of Florence, and the scenography and the settings was amazing. On the other side, in 2015, for example, this is one of the scenography that has been realized by Emanuele Luzzati. Emanuele Luzzati is one of the most important scenographers nowadays in Italy and worldwide. Unfortunately, also he has death, but his scenography are famous all around. So beauty in art is 3 levels: shape, form, expression, but is also is an oxymoron. So beauty in art is also when it's something scaring or it's something, I would say, terrifying. This is Caravaggio, the Medusa, that he painted in 1596, where, of course, if you see this disc, is really terrifying for the expression and the realism of the Medusa and of, I would say, what is that? At the other time, there is William Shakespeare. Well, you know that in Romeo and Juliet, all the, I would say, the verses of Romeo and Juliet are characterized by oxymoron, by images that are, of course, contraposition of reality. So the oxymoron in art can be oxymoron between art, so that represents something real, but at the same time can represent something completely invented. Oxymoron between ratio, so something that is rational, and the genius, the geniality of the artist, and the oxymoron between the nature and the human creativity. So, again, some of these oxymoron between mimesis and invention. You can see a sculpture of Max Brenner of 2017. This is a UK artist, and he is very famous for realizing work of art that are really realistic, really hyper-realistic. This is a work of art realized with wax and real, like hairs, like I would say, real, I would say, hairs of human beings. In the other side, so on the right side, you have Igor Mitorai, again with another exhibition in Naples, in Pompeii. And as you can see here, instead, of course, it starts from the human body, but the representation is then an invention of the artist, with these little windows where it comes from, like faces or other parts of the human body. Work of art as an oxymoron between rationalism and genius. From on the left side, you have Escher, and as you may know, Escher is the genius of the impossible, I would say, realities. As you can see here, no, it seems, I would say, something that could work, this staircase, but in effect, it's something that doesn't work. It's something that is, of course, impossible, unreal, and Escher is famous for that. But anyway, he realized his work of art using rationality and using the laws of mathematics. On the other side, there is, for example, the geniality of Hieronymus Bosch. Hieronymus Bosch is one of the great masters of the Flanders painters, and he is very famous because he created this work of art in the imagine 1490-1510, the Garden of the Heart of the Lights, where he basically put inside his works visions that are completely unreal, that are completely, of course, visionaire, that of something that was completely unexisting and neither possible to think or to imagine at the time of Bosch. So this is very, I would say, is, of course, there are both artists, they are both work of art, but one is an artwork inspired by the Russian, the mathematics, the other one is inspired more by the genius and the, I would say, madness, if we can say, of the artist. And then nature and human creativity. the beauty of the nature. These are jellyfish into the seaside, so completely natural, and so in their, I would say, normal setting. On the other side, there are the jellyfish, I would say, lamps by Rick Strini, and he is an artist that collaborates a lot with Venini as well as with other Murano glass factories. And as you can see, he reinterpreted and designed lamps that looks like jellyfish. And then, of course, the aesthetics in art is itself an oxymoron, because if we have a look to these that are absolutely considered artwork and masterpieces from all the worldwide critic, from a side we have Apollo and Daphne of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, that of course represent the classic beauty, the immortal beauty, but also from the other side we have Les Origines du Monde de Gustave Courbet, where of course the beauty of the nature, we can say, of the human being, and the concept also, the great revolutionary concept of the painting was, anyway, these are so two different kind of aesthetics, but at the same time considered from the worldwide critic aesthetical and important as work of art. So until now we have seen the concept of aesthetics and beauty. So we said what is in art. We have seen why beauty and aesthetic is very important for art. But now we have also to understand and to define what or which kind of artwork can be considered real an artwork, because not everything can be considered an artwork. When we see these painters on the street painting like in copying the great masterpieces of the great artists, I mean, these are artists, of course, they know very well how to draw, they know very well how to design, but what they realize there is a work of art or not, or is just a copy. And if it's a copy, is not a work of art. So we have to give some parameters for understanding if an artwork is really an artwork. The first one is the animation. The second is the aesthetics, and we spoke about it. The third is the meanings. The fourth is the excellence. And the fifth is the timelessness. So only if an artwork has this, I would say, value, we can say that an artwork is really an artwork. The famous Pietà of Michelangelo in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is an artwork, because it was absolutely of a great innovation when Michelangelo realized it at 22 years old in 1498, because he represented the lady, the Madonna, young as, and basically younger than the Son, than Jesus Christ, because he decided to represent a new aesthetic where Madonna was completely, I would say, untouched from the scene, should be represented as a very young girl, so uncorrupted by the sin. And this is the concept of the new aesthetics. The meanings, there are thousands of meanings inside this work of art. The excellence, because the marble is, of course, treated by Michelangelo in the best way it could be possible at the time. And timeless, because it's a work of art that is valid and it is, I would say, admired by the observers forever and ever. The same we can say of this work of art. Here we have Pablo Picasso on the beach. It's a very famous of him, work of art of him. We are in 1937. And of course, imagine we are in 1937, the great innovation that Picasso, that was anyway exceptional painters, that he knows anyway how to represent very well in a figurative way bodies and landscape. He decided to represent this, I would say, this very beautiful environment, les bagnades, so the women on the beach, schematizing all the figures thanks to the cubism, into all his studies about the volumes. Then, of course, work of art could be also controversial. And there are a lot of critics about work of art that, in effect, nowadays are really masterpieces of the history of art. We spoke, for example, about as you can see, the famous fountain of Marcel Duchamp, that, as you know, is basically the bathroom where the person will pee, okay? Or, for example, the Piero Manzoni, the artist's shit, and Piero Manzoni realized it in 1961, is a box that contains 30 grams of the shit of the artist. And nowadays, it's one of the most, I would say, researched object of the desire of collectors of contemporary art. Or if you can see Damien Hirst, 6 Pills, for example, he created, Damien Hirst, a series of work of art that are basically boxes or furniture with pills, simple pills. So here the value is not the value, of course, of the material of the work of art, but of the idea itself of the artist. He, for example, Damien Hirst, wanted to express the critics of the and of course the difficult moment into the society at that time, of our society. So I would say, to come a little bit more closer to our time, Maurizio Cattelan in 2019, so last year, in Art Basel in Miami. Art Basel is the most important art fair in Miami, or anyway for contemporary art in the world. He showcased into the Peloton Gallery this artwork. This artwork is, as you can see, is a banana with a tape on it. So basically, it's a banana scotched on the wall. This work of art was, I would say, sold from the gallery to $120,000. So a banana with a tape was sold at that price. So you can also understand, because now if we think about in a managerial or a business side point of view, the power of the idea and the power of the work of art also in a business point of view. So here is the power, of course, of the artist, Maurizio Cattelan, that I would say has such power to sell a banana with a tape for $120,000. Of course, this is the power of this idea, as we have seen, it's quite ironic and I really like it, boomed for a lot of advertising for a lot of companies. We can see the Durex company, or we can see Supreme. We can see, for example, Burger King, where, of course, he says like the potato with the tape for 1 cent. For example, for the funeral service, they also decided to use this kind of aesthetic. Or, for example, the Carrefour, where they say avec nos produits bio, l'art culinaire est à portée de tous. So the banana is €159. That is, of course, for, I would say, affordable for everyone, not as just the banana of Maurizio Cattelan. If we, so I would say it's quite, I would say, funny to see that David Datuna is I would say, a critic and an artist too. He decided to eat the banana of Maurizio Cattelan. So he basically eats a $120,000
We respect Mauricio, but his art performance not react in the gallery. Thank you, very good.
So as you can see, the basically the artworks can be really, really, really controversially sometimes, and the value of the artwork is really depends from the power of the artist itself or from the power of the idea of the artist. Anyway, if we go to to think about everything is art and what makes a work of art and artwork, we said these 5 elements: innovation, aesthetics, meanings, excellence, and timelessness. But if we reflect a little bit about these 5 fundamental concepts, we have to say that, or we can say that these concepts are concepts that belongs also to the definition of luxury and of design. Because a luxury product is, of course, a product that is innovated, that is, I would say, that has an innovation, that is beautiful, that has a meaning, that has, of course, an excellence in the production of the product, and it is timelessness. As well as a design product or a very design product has all these 5, I would say, characteristics. So we can say that the connection between art, design, and luxury is basically given by these 5 characteristics: innovation, aesthetics, meanings, excellence, and timeless. These are not only the characteristics of a work of art, but are characteristics of design pieces and luxury pieces, luxury products. And so this is the universe that connects these 3 different worlds: art, design, and luxury. These 5 keywords. If we want to have a look and we want to, I would say, see an example of this connection, it's quite funny, because it's quite funny, but it comes from a very not so well-known work of art, that is this Colossus of Constantine I. Is the Colossus of the, this great sculpture that Constantine I, the Roman emperor, decided to, would say, to ask to the artist to realize in his honor, and was basically a sculpture that was tall more than a building of 10 floors. Unfortunately, the sculptures realized anyway in between the 312, 315, 330 AD was destroyed from the barbarians, and a portion of some parts of this sculpture are now conserved into the Museum Capitolini in Rome. And you can see here in a courtyard, you can see the face, you can see a part of the hand, you can see a part of the arm, you can see, for example, a part of the feet. Why I'm showing to you this, I would say, sculpture divided, fragmented in parts, and maybe not so beautiful in a way? Because this sculpture has been one of the most important source of inspiration for artists, designers of every time. We can, for example, see that starting from this, for example, Giorgio De Chirico and René Magritte take the inspiration for artworks that are, of course, of moment in history very far away from the Roman Empire. We are speaking of 1914 and 1947, so in the metaphysic and surrealism art movement. But in design, as you can see, Gaetano Pesce, this is one of the most important armchair of all the history of design, realized by B&B. He realized this armchair in 1969, the famous foot. And this, if we have a look, we step back to the foot of Constantine, we can see that basically it's the same, but of course the transposition in something soft and to lie on your, I would say, living room. So other samples, from example, Maurizio Cattelan took inspiration from the hand of Costantino. And he realized this famous sculpture with the middle finger that is in Milan in front of the Affari building, as well as Seletti, another important design company, realized it. So, as you can see, innovation, aesthetic, meaning, excellence, and timeless are the characteristic of design that connects design, luxury, and art. And lastly, I would focus on timeless because the real work of art are timeless, means are out of their time. One sample above all, this is a work of art of El Greco. I hope you have seen the beautiful exhibition in Grand Palais that was in Paris. Anyway, in this exhibition, we are in this work of art is a work of art of the 1608-1614, and is the vision of St. John. So it's the moment when St. John has vision about the scene and about, I would say, these temptations. If we think that this work of art has been painted in the 1608, 1614, and we have looked to the contemporaries work of art of El Greco and contemporary painters, we can see that the language of El Greco is really far away from the language of his contemporaries in art. It's far away for the use of the color, is far away from the use of the light, is far away for the use also of the volumes of the body, and is instead very, I would say, close to what will be the paintings and the painters with the, for example, Impressionism. Paul Cézanne is one of the sample. If you can see these paintings of Paul Cézanne, the famous baigneuses, so the women on the river that Cézanne used to paint a lot during his careers. If you want to compare how Cézanne used the color and the body and the volumes with respect to El Greco 2 centuries before, you can really see something really close. So this is the proof that work of art and really the real work of art are really contemporaries. So these topics about art and connection with design and luxury, I hope was clear, but art has a great involvement with society too. So why this is important? Because in the time of COVID, the connection of art and society, and so nowadays, is really important. And understanding this connection means understanding the importance of the artist nowadays. The power and the, I would say, connection of the art with society has been always very strong. From the Renaissance age, with, as you can see, the famous Piero della Francesca portrait of the Duke of Urbino in Italy, as well as, for example, the great torchbearer sculpture that was, of course, one of the most important sculptures of propaganda of Nazi regime in Berlin, in Germany. Why they are both very important? Because they are, they are both manifesti, both the manifestos of the importance of work of art as a tools of communication and advertising for the person that has power at the time and for impose the power on the people. All the great dictators, Stalin, as well as Hitler, all in the story, Mao and so on, they use the artist and art to advertise themselves and as political, of course, language. So this is also other samples with the Dada and the Situations International or Fluxus. They are all art movement that they, I would say, try to express art and use art into sociological and political meanings. This is, for example, in this slide, there is the picture of the one of the most important work of art, I would say related to this art and society, that is the famous fourth state of Giuseppe Pellizola that represent the sort of the revolution of the class of the poor people, of the lower class of the society. Anyway, there have been movement in art that has really changed the world, that has really changed our society. And the four most important movements that has changed it has been the conceptual art, the feminist art, the modernist art, and the black arts movement. These are the four movements in art with Levitt, Cindy Sherman, Marina Abramovic, Henri Matisse, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and so on, that they have really changed the world and the society as we know nowadays. So, sorry, there are, of course, a lot of, if you are interested about the connection between art and society, there are a lot of websites. For example, this is a website about artsandsociety.org, where really there are a lot of projects realized by artists, realized in different parts of the world, where the artists are called to, or they decided to realize something that will, of course, change a bit, or will impose a bit something new to the society of that specific place. Of course, with also a humanitarian point of view, with, I would say, helping the population in that places, but really a very interesting project. So finally, also because it's 7:30 and I don't want to be too long because dinner is waiting for us, we arrive to the point of very important, so we have all this introduction that I hope allows you to understand what is art, what is it art, who is an artist, how we can define beauty in art, how we can define something that is an artwork, so what is really an artwork and what is not an artwork at all. We have seen, for example, the importance of the about, for example, the I would say the importance of the artwork itself. But now, after all this great introduction, we went to the topic of this presentation. So the relation between art and of course, between art and the death. And the relation between these two universes is something that, of course, also here needs to be defined. What is it, Thanatos? Thanatos is the death. So Thanatos in the Greek mythology is the personification of death. And in the mythology, it was a son of Nyx, that is the night, and Erebos, that is the darkness, and the twin of Hypnos, so of the sleep. Thanatos has been represented towards the centuries in different ways. But anyway, always very beautiful. So there is the concept of the death in the classic or in the Greek mythology as something beautiful, as something youth, as something, I would say, absolutely aesthetic. You can see these are two representations of Thanatos, of the Greek and of the Roman culture, of the Roman art. Again, continuing, Thanatos is seen as really a beautiful, somehow a fib. So, or for example, as a Cupid. So, for example, as Eros with the crossed legs and with the torch that is reversed, because it symbols that the fire is going to finish, and is the symbols of the life that is finishing. But anyway, if you have a look to all the representation of Thanatos, so of the death, you can see that really are represented, or is represented, something beautiful, something with wings, so never with as something terrifying, as we can, I would say, understand or think nowadays when we think about death. The Thanatos, and so the death, is something very important not only in art, but also in the psychology. If we think to Sigmund Freud has been the first to define the relation between Eros and Thanatos, that are the two most important components in the man, in every human beings. I would say is a sort of thrill, seeking, and aggression are views and action which stem from this Thanatos instinct. Then, for example, it is the thanatophobia. It is the fear of things associated with or reminiscence of death and mortality, such as corpse or graveyards, and is related to necrophobia. The thanatology, that is the academic and scientific study of death among human beings. And then euthanasia, the concept of the good death in Greek. So the act of ending the life with, I would say, of the human being. So anyway, there is always this, as you can see, so also in the psychology, this very important concept of the Thanatos, of the death, it is always linked into the life of the man, and also into the passion of the man, because Eros and Thanatos is the relation between passion and death. You can see here, for example, two artworks, very famous. One is, I think you have seen a lot of time, is the Ophelia of John Everett Millais, and is one of the most important pre-Raphaelite work of art. And in the other, I would say in the right side, less known, there is the famous, anyway, work of John William Waterhouse, that is Hypnos and Thanatos, so the two brothers that are, I would say, sleeping and the death one. But what is very funny, and I want to show, because I decided not to show all my videos, but this video I want to show, is that because we are speaking about art and we think that art is something completely unrelated from the business point of view and from the design point of view, as I told to you, always art, design, and luxury as a connection. And the connection stands in the 5 points that I told you before. Gucci, into the 2018, has realized a genius campaign, advertising campaign, with the artist, so not with the designer, with the artist, Ignasi Monreal. We are in 2018. The name of the campaign is Hallucinogenic World. And Gucci, with the creative director Alessandro Michele, realized a videos, now we are going to see, for, I would say, showing the dresses of the collection Spring-Summer 2018 using, I would say, the sort of gallery. So the spot is like an art gallery, and in this art gallery we will see very famous work of art reinterpreted by this illustrator and with all the figures that dressed Gucci on, and we will see also Ophelia. So the work of art that we have seen here, very famous. So the lady, of course, death in the water, that is reinterpreted by Gucci.
Greetings, and welcome to another wonderful day in our Gucci gallery. Sometimes, a painting is as much about what it doesn't show you as what it does. Here we use some Italian ultramarine, the tiniest bit of crimson, and some cadmium yellow. we've just added a couple of highlights here and here to really make the color sing. Here, emerald green and a touch of Renaissance gold.
So as you can see, anonymous wash, for example.
And my favorite of them all, just a touch of manganese.
Ophelia. So I decided to show you this video and not all the other videos, because if not, my presentation would have been too long. But this video, because as you can see, so how a genius like Alessandro Michele, a very important brand worldwide famous as Gucci, decided to realize a campaign where they use like the image of basically of a gallery, an art gallery, and a very famous work of art, reinterpreted, of course, for showing the fashion collection of Spring-Summer 2018 of Gucci. So, in my opinion, absolutely amazing. And anyway, we can see the use of the death, because it's not a case that this video and this campaign ends with the image of Ophelia. Ophelia, that is so the image of the lady. Of course, in the history of Hamlet, it has death, that suicide herself. So with Thanatos, so beauty and Thanatos, Eros and Thanatos are, I would say, the two elements characterizing this this campaign. So the death and the history of death. In the history of the human beings, in our history, our universe, there are three historical moments, as I would say, our moment, that I would say is really important to take into consideration. And these are, I would say, three moments. The first one is the Peste Nera, the Black Death. We are in 1346, 1363, so 14th century. Imagine that this plague caused 20 million of victims. And this is a very famous fresco that is located in Palermo, in Palazzo Batelli's gallery. The name is The Triumph of Death, and represents the triumph of the death, the triumph of this plague. Another important moment is the 17th century, where there is another very spreading plague that caused 15 million of victims. And for example, this is the moment that in art we have, so for example, figure like Andrea Palladio, architect, or Andrea Veronese, artist. And this, for example, is I decided to use this picture because this is the picture of a church that has been built and decorated in Venice in the 17th century, because the king of the city, the Doge, asked to Palladio and to Veronese to realize something in architecture, a work of art, to thank God for having freed the city from the plague. And then, for example, another very heavy plague, 300, as you can see, is like 3 centuries after, each one from the other. We have the Spagnola, the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu is a flu that caused 100 million of victims. One of the most deathful plague of all over the history. And I decided to represent it with a painting. This is a painting of the famous Viennese artist Egon Schiele. The title of this painting is Death and Girl, Man and Girl. And Egon Schiele himself, he will die as his wife and as all his family for the Spanish flu. Anyway, these are so terrible moments in art, in story, as a little bit the moment that we are living nowadays, because nowadays we are not, I would say, living a happy days moment. But in art, this was a very, I would say, this moment of death, they were very, very good. Why? Because they give birth to three very important art movements. The Black Death in the 14th century, it, I would say, originated the Gothic movement. With the plague of the 17th century, as I said, anyway, it was the booming of the mannerism. And with the Spanish flu, it was the booming of secession or secession style. Secession style is, of course, in the most correct way to pronounce it. Anyway, so the first moment was the Gothic, as we said. So the first plague, the big plague, the Black Death of 14th century, brings the Gothic. Gothic, it's one of the most important movements because it's a global movement. It's a movement that takes architecture, that takes of course, painting, sculptures, takes all, basically, takes all the most important, I would say, work of art of the times. And I would say also way of conceiving the art. The Gothic was born when? In the Ile-de-France, with the famous Saint-Denis Church, Abbey Church, with the Abbot Suger, and of course from France and anyway from the Northern Europe, it spreads little by little, of course, in all the Central Europe and the Southern Europe. Even though in the Central and Southern Europe, the Romanesque was much more developed and much more common. Anyway, the Gothic is I would say, the characteristic of the media of the Gothic art was, of course, sculpture, was, of course, the painting, was, of course, the frescoes, was, of course, the glasses in the church, the manuscripts, also because we have to always to think and to know that glasses and these wide windows in the church why they decided to realize this great church, these great windows all painted on, because these windows with the light became the so-called Bibles for the poor people. The poor people entering the church and looking at the, I would say, image of the colored glass, of the stained glass on the floor of the church could read the history of the Bible. That was the same thing why of the frescoes in the Renaissance age, and for example of Giotto and St. Francis in Assisi. It's the concept of representing something beautiful, but representing a story that everybody just looking at the paintings or here at the glasses could understand without reading, because they don't know how to read. Of course, this is the moment of the rise of the cities, of university. So it's, even though it's a medieval moment, is very important, rich moment of things. And of course, in terms of our subject, Thanatos in Gothic, these are, for example, 3 samples of work of art that are with the thematic of Thanatos, of the death, but in the Gothic moment, with 3 very important painters. Going from the left to the right, we have Simone Martini with the frescoes about the life of Saint Martin. And this is the frescoes that represents the death of Saint Martin, the moment when the saint dies. And of course, as you can see, is already in the sky with the angel. There is, for example, the lamentation on the Jesus Christ body of Giotto in Scrovegni Church Chapel in Padua. And here, as you can see, the death is really, as you can see from the face of Giotto, the face are really, I mean, he wanted really to express the instead concept of the, I would say, of the sadness of the human beings when you lose somebody that, of course, you take care, somebody of your family, when you lose a son. And here you can see from the faces of Giotto that are really, really, really like a mask of sadness. And for example, on top, there is the allegory of the bad government. So if we have two samples of paintings of death of saints or of holy person, like Jesus Christ or a saint, on top instead you have the allegory of the bad government. So the concept of death as punishment for civil person that hasn't ruled the country in the right way. But one of the most important, I would say, frescoes of the time.
The large fresco depicts the grim subject of the triumph of death, a very common theme in the Middle Ages, when there were no cures for the numerous outbreaks of plague. The fresco was painted around 1450 in the courtyard of Palazzo Sclafani, which was being used as a hospital at the time. In 1944, after the building was bombed, it was removed from the wall it was painted on and was clumsily cut into 4 parts, with the unfortunate results you can see today. The author was undoubtedly a painter of outstanding ability, but despite extensive research, his identity remains a mystery. In the center of the fresco, death is depicted as a skeleton on horseback, with strips of flesh falling away, galloping wildly over a heap of people he has already killed, belonging to the upper echelons of society at the time. If you look closely at the clothing of the dead, you'll see they include bishops, a pope, an emperor, a sultan, and a man of the law. This indicates the death spares no one, however rich or powerful. The skeleton is holding a bow from which arrows are piercing men and women as they go about their favorite pastimes in a magnificent garden, amid song, hunting, and carefree activities. The most memorable element in the fresco is the horse, depicted with a flowing mane as the terrible, fearsome instrument of an ineluctable fate, painted in a style that would not have displeased Pablo Picasso, who claimed to have taken inspiration from this work for his painting, Guernica. This tremendous scene features a wealth of cruel, harrowing details, yet at the same time appears suspended in a delicate, timeless fairy tale dimension. Note how cruelly the grim knight haughtily ignores the poor, the sick, and the crippled, who are vainly invoking death as a liberation from their ills.
So, as you can see, there was the concept of the death that, of course, like, I would say, is, in a way, of course, something that taking into consideration the noble, but at the same time is something equal for everyone. So the nobles are not treated in a different way from death as the poor person. Of course, if we think and we take into consideration, I'm just checking my video setting if it's okay. Anyway, if we take into consideration instead the next moment of the second plague, so we are in the 17th century, we are, of course, into the mannerism. And the mannerism is the new art movement that goes after the Renaissance age. And the mannerism derives from the Italian concept of maniera. The name was coined by Giorgio Vasari, that he says and he described it as the maniera moderna or modern style. And what I would say is really nice, of course, to see, and which is the main characteristic of the mannerism in respect to the, I would say, other work of other artistic movement, is that the approach of and the characteristic of Manis is that the aesthetic was really different, because if Renaissance was very, I would say, focused on the proportion, on the balance, or ideal beauty, the Manners exaggerates with the, I would say, asymmetrical and unnaturally elegant shapes. If you have a look to this Madonna here of the Parmigianino, we are in 16th century. As you can see, first of all, the proportion of Madonna are a little bit, I would say, not natural, the neck and the proportion of the body, but also the proportion of the child himself, and anyway, the position of Madonna and of the child are really unnatural and really artifact. But this concept of asymmetric and dynamism is really a characteristic of the Mannerist work of art. And if we speak about our, I would say, concept, it is the concept of the death, the memento mori is, of course, one of the most important characteristic of art, of the Mannerist art. So the characteristic of, so the, I would say, memento mori means, of course, of the testamentum, or, I mean, proof of the death. And remember that you have to die. Basically, that one is the concept. And of course, here you can see 3 artworks where the memento mori, so the symbol is the skull that is became really a strong symbol in Andrea Previtali, or a object of a natura morta for Philippe de Champagne, and instead really a very important element for the paintings of Caravaggio with San Girolamo. And so the, I would say this, the San Girolamo of Caravaggio. This is, of course, I would say, a mood board about so how death is represented in the Mannerism. And, for example, one of the most important painting about death in this time is the Triumph of Death, so the same name of the frescoes before, but realized basically 3 centuries later by Peter Bruegger the Elder. So as you can see, is really a, I would say, a vision that is really apocalyptic in a way, really strong, really, of course, something really far away from the concept of death and of Thanatos, very classy, very beauty, very harmonious of the Greek and Roman culture. But then we are going to the third moment of big important plug, and is the Spanish flu. We are in the 20th century, and as I told you, in that moment in Vienna, it comes out an artistic movement really important that will change completely the panorama of the Austrian art, and anyway that is really connected with the Art Nouveau. It is the so-called secession style or Jugendstil, with artists such as Gustav Klimt, for example, Egon Schiele, for example, the famous architect that is Joseph Maria Olbrich. Joseph Maria Olbrich is the author of the famous Secession Pavilion in Vienna, that is the building of the secession artists, where they used to have their exhibition inside. And this very famous, the cupola, that is all realized in metal with golden leaves. And as you can see in the picture. And of course, if we want to represent a mood board about the concept of death for these artists, it's quite, I would say, I wouldn't say funny, but anyway, very important to know that both Gustav Klimt, either Egon Schiele, they both dead for the Spanish flu. And this is one of the most important work of art of Klimt, is The Death and Life by Gustav Klimt of 1915 of the Belvedere Museum in Vienna, as well as The Death and Girl, Man and Girl of Egon Schiele of 1915. Or, for example, this is a work of art of Max Klinger, the name is Henry, and we are in 1980. So anyway, you can see how death is represented by this artist. One of the most important, anyway, paintings of the 19th century, but still is considered, I would say, a paintings that could be considered inside the starting of the symbolism, Art Nouveau and secessionism style, is the famous self-portrait with the death plague the fiddle of Arnold Böcklin. Sorry. It's very familiar, where the artist
Usually when you look at a self-portrait, you see an artist staring directly at himself in a mirror. But in the self-portrait with Death by Böcklin, he seems not so much to be looking as listening.
That menacing figure of death is not only playing the violin, but seems to be whispering something in his ear.
He seems ecstatic. We can see clearly the skull with all of its teeth. It seems to be smiling demonically.
Grinning, I would say.
Yeah, eager and rather excited. We see that claw-like hand of bones that clutches the bow, and the violin is being played, but it's being played on the single remaining string, as if Böcklin has only that one string to go. It seems so final.
Death knows he's won here.
Art outlasts the life of the artist.
So, very interesting work of art where the artist decided basically to represent, to portray himself with the death that is, I would say, playing the violin behind him. So the concept of the artist that want to also to, in a way, represent something also for, I would say, be a sort of scaramantic with the concept of the death and the death itself. So these were all I would say characteristic and all moment of art and plague. Of course, we have to take into consideration that also what we are living nowadays is a plague. And the name of this plague is COVID or coronavirus, as we want to name. This is a plague of 2019, 2020, so exactly as you can see, basically quite 100 years after the Spanish flu. Is a plague that at the moment, it caused 2 million of victims all around the world. Now, I mean, at today, then of course, we hope that it will stop. Anyway, at today, we have about 2 million of victims. And is a plague that also, as the others, maybe has brought another movement, another artistic movement. What will be this artistic movement? We don't know yet, but we can think and take into consideration that maybe we can name it post-globalization, because anyway, after this coronavirus, of course, our habitudes, our way of living, and also the concept of globalization is really, really changed a lot in all of us, in all our minds. So, Thanatos and coronavirus or COVID-19 is, of course, will be an art movement I called post-optimism, post-globalization. I don't know, this is terms that I mean, with which I call this art movement. It's anyway really a revolutionary moment, and also for art. For example, this is one of the most important artists nowadays. The name is TV Boy. He is a mural artist. He created this mural in Milan on February 2020. Basically, on the Friday of the week before the starting of the confinement in Italy. And as you can see, he reinterprets the famous Kiss of Francesco Hayez, that is, I would say, guested into the Pinacoteca of Brera Museum, the original paintings. What he did, he reinterpreted these paintings where the two lovers are kissing with the mask and holding in the hand the amuchina, so the hygienized gel for the hands. But this is just one sample. Another, for example, very important artist, Italian artist, is Milo Manara. He is an illustrator, and for example, he is one of the first to design, to draw for comics and for histories, I would say, the danger of this virus, and so the danger for persons like doctors, nurses, everyone in front of this virus. So anyway, all this work of art, which are the aim of it, is of course to represent from a side our everyday life, from another also to face and solve a little bit the problem of our contemporaneity, to fight the social distancing and also the psychosis inducing virus, showing us their vision of the future, that anyway there is a possibility, there is anyway an exit from this tunnel of death that we seem to be in these days. This is, for example, the mood board of nowadays work of art. The Gioconda, still by TV Boy, with the mask on her face, or, as I was saying to you, the Milo Manara illustrations with the nurses, or, for example, with the shop assistant, where, of course, they are nowadays, they are obliged to save themselves from this, I would say, invisible enemy that, of course, all of us is facing. So these are, I would say, the answer of the contemporary artists to this moment, of the contemporary artists to our everyday life. And I would say one of the greatest contemporary artwork, because we are really at the beginning of the coronavirus, and so we are still looking to the work of art of the artists in the next days, what they will do about coronavirus and about this moment of crisis. But, for example, an artist that understood a lot the power of the death and the concept of the memento mori as something really valid nowadays has been Damien Hirst. Damien Hirst is one of the most important contemporary artists, and in 2007 he realized For the Love of God, that is the famous known skull, all covered by diamonds, real diamonds, with a pink rose diamonds into the center of the skull here. The cost to realize this work of art, because it's a skull full of diamonds, was 14 millions, and it was sold for 50 millions. This is
I used to read a comic book at school called 2000 AD, and it had a character in it called Tharg, who had a kind of mind stone in his forehead. He was a powerful godlike figure who controlled the universe. When I came along and started making art, I was like, I wanted to change the world. Every artwork that's ever interested me is about death. I thought, what's the maximum you could pit against death? And then, you know, diamonds came to my mind. I ended up approaching Bentley and Skinner to make it for me, and they have an appointment to the Queen. Wow. That's the way. Is it kind of held together? Oh, I see.
It is, but it's just pinned and glued, so be careful.
So don't go throwing it around. I love it. I got the skull from a shop called Get Stuffed in Islington. And it was quite hard to find a skull that actually just said, I'm a skull, and not said anything else. Because we're dealing with death, which is so negative, it has to be totally positive, and you can't cut corners, and it's just got to be, you know, ridiculous in its perfection. We took the original skull, removed the teeth, had the teeth cleaned up by a dentist, and cast the whole skull in platinum. The idea for titling it For the Love of God came from my mother, who used to say that whenever I had crazy ideas. For the love of God, what are you going to do next? But I had no idea really what it would look like or how it would be perceived, and I had a big fear that it was going to end up like, you know, some sort of tacky piece of jewellery.
So, as you can see, this skull is a real skull, completely covered of real diamonds. And I have to say that the central pink diamonds, the pure shaped diamonds, is not bad at all. Maybe I would like on a rating, why not? Anyway, this work of art make a lot of discuss and make discuss a lot. A lot, of course, was a lot revolutionary at the time. We were in 2007, when the concept of death and I would say the vision of death was something completely considered something out of the society, because the society was optimistic, because we were in the full consumist era, because the man seems to live forever and ever. The medicine seems to bring the man to, I would say, along the life of the man for years. So the concept of death really was looked like something very far away from the man and from the society. And this artist, Damien Hirst, had the great, I would say, power to anticipate something that we are living nowadays. So this modern concept of the memento mori. So I hope that with my conference gives, I would say, has been, first of all, an unconventional conversation with you. I hope that you haven't perceived really like a very conventional and rigid conference. I hope that you like the multimedia contents that I set into the presentation. I want, I would say, to conclude my presentation with this. I think that we have a hope in these days of confinement that is not to have a look hours and hours on Instagram to the shitty posts of the users, but maybe to have a look a little bit to art, to the contemporary art, but also to the art of the past, to comprehend art, to appreciate art, to understand that art and death is something that is inside our lives, but that art plus death can originate something that is beauty, something that is poetic, because as Mahatma Gandhi used to say, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. So as a lot of us is doing these days, it's about learning to dance in the rain. And remember always that fear, the anagram of fear, is face everything and rise. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to haven't been such a lot boring. And I wish you, I would say, have a good, happy evening and to enjoy your dinner. Thank you very much. If you have, of course, any question, I'm really, happy and disposable to answer to any question.
Thank you so much, Angelo. It was brilliant, very instructive and inspiring. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for your words.
Yeah.
I've looked to the chat. Thank you, Fares. Thank you, Stella. Thank you, George. So thank you for all of you for your attention. I hope it was really it was interesting for you. I try to not set as a conventional lectures about history of art, but starting from a thematic, I follow a fil rouge for, I would say, arriving to the point of the death and the beauty somehow of the death, or how can we interpret it, the beauty of the death in this moment of our, this critical moment of our life. Thank you to everyone. I'm looking to your chat. Thank you for your words. And nothing. I hope that this presentation will bring you to, I would say, understand and a little bit to bring you a little bit closer to art and to see art in a different way, with different eyes.